Let's talk about what comes next with the Bike Streets project, phases 2 through 4 of the Bike Streets solution. But first, just a quick recap of phase 1, which was all about producing a better bike map of Denver using 250 miles of low-speed, low-traffic side streets. Now that we have this map in hand, the question, of course, is from here, what do we need to do to get to 100,000 daily riders? Let's talk about phase 2 first, which is where I think we are at the moment. One of the biggest problems with bike streets right now is that when you're out riding your bike, you don't actually know if you're riding on bike streets. I think that there's a pretty simple and straightforward solution to that, which is very inexpensive markings on the pavement and or signage. In this case, in this illustration, we're showing it as basic spray-painted pink dots throughout the bike streets network that make it clear to bicyclists when you're on a bike street, when you need to turn, when you've reached an intersection. These are fairly inconspicuous. They will be very easy for bicyclists to follow, but they won't make much of a scene when it relates to cars driving around in those neighborhoods. Additionally, we're going to work with the city to try to get special dispensations for bicyclists to ride on sidewalks at tricky intersections. There are already examples of this on the existing Denver bike map, and what we need to do is get the city's permission to extend these sorts of exceptions to various intersections on the bike streets map. Phase 3 is all about traffic reduction and calming, and significantly, this is where we start to make some deeper investments. But that notwithstanding, those investments should only be made if we can justify them based on ridership. In other words, we shouldn't graduate from phase 2 to phase 3 until we have meaningful levels of ridership on the bike streets route. This is a pretty significant departure from the way things are typically done, where lots of money is spent on bike routes or bike lanes with an if you build it, they will come mentality. The idea is these additional steps that are taken in phase 3 are taken only because there are already a lot of people riding their bikes on these routes based on our work in phase 2. Let's look at what some of these things in phase 3 look like. The goal, of course, is to reduce traffic on these side streets and to calm the traffic that is already out there. In other words, fewer cars on these streets and fewer cars going slower. This is, I should mention, not just great for bicyclists, but also great for the folks on those streets because they have fewer cars and fewer cars ripping by at very high velocity. So this is what it looks like at a little bit closer up. We've got things like speed bumps, traffic circles at intersections. These are things that slow cars down and discourage drivers from using neighborhood streets as cut-throughs when there's a high volume of traffic on the big arterial streets. Then there are things like pinch points. These only allow one car through at a time, which further discourage cut-through traffic and high speeds. Pinch points are pretty cool as well because while cars go one at a time, bicyclists can proceed on the sides of those unimpeded. And last, let's talk about phase 4, which is pretty substantial investment in major intersections. So at such a point that we again justify investment because ridership is significantly higher than where it was previously, we can graduate from phase 3 to phase 4. And in phase 4, we start to look at some of the bigger intersections. Just down the street from a traffic signal that already exists is the bike streets intersection. We would install, in this case, traffic signals that are bike specific that are timed with the major intersection just down the street. In other words, if there's a big intersection of two driving streets, when that light turns red, the light at the bike street signal would also turn red for cars, which means that traffic would largely proceed unimpeded. This means that traffic patterns wouldn't change radically, and it would allow that many more people to get out and feel confident about riding their bikes. With each of these incremental phases, I think it bears mention that there are virtuous circles in place, which is to say that as more people ride on these routes and the density of bicycle traffic on them increases, so too will additional riders feel empowered and emboldened and excited to get out and give them a try. And as those people get out, ridership will increase, so too will more and more people feel excited about getting out and going for a ride. Next up, we need your help making this happen. We need you to volunteer to be a Bike Street's neighborhood captain. If you're interested, please send an email to info@bikestreets.com. We'll have more of an overview on what that position entails in the next video. Stay tuned.